Good morning, everybody. We're here today to discuss digital services and touchless transactions within the theme of local government. We have some expert speakers with us that I'll touch on in a second. But by way of introduction, at risk of repeating the obvious, the world is facing an unprecedented crisis. We have a global population of 7 billion people that are suffering restrictions in one form or another all across the planet. Projections were that we were going to lose 5 to 10% of our population, which is a horrific figure of up to 700 million people. The virus has had no time for digital transformation, and it absolutely has no respect for the plans that we as mere humans had for what was going to be the year 2020. In the UK, 99% of SMEs, some 5.6 million businesses, are run by entrepreneurs and have under 10 staff. And the UK economy is well over 80% services based. That allows us to be fleet of foot. It allows us to react to crises such as we have faced. However, those are entrepreneurs that now need a little bit of support. They've seen their income disappear. They don't have huge cash reserves, but they are the very heart of the innovation of global Britain. If you think about the stages of the crisis, in March, the first priority was to make sure that everybody got fed. Once we'd made sure that everybody had been to the shops, it wasn't panic buying. It was simply going back to buying patterns of the 1980s. Once everybody was stocked up, we could then lock down safely and keep people in situ. And that happened across the world. And the UK supply chain is a world-class food supply chain. We're now then in the period of recovery, and we need to provide confidence to everybody. And in parking and transport services, that confidence is about saying to people, we must get outdoors, we must start trading with our local businesses. It seems clear, however, that any discussion over the beginnings of Industrial Revolution 4 are now over. It's being kick-started in the most brutal of fashions. And if we take local government services, current projections are that our economy, our GDP, could see a fall of up to 40%. We know that local government income in some areas has returned to levels not seen since 2008. And the LGA is suggesting that that provides a 9 billion shortfall in badly needed cash to fund local government services that we all rely on. The future is most definitely green. And that means that the UK is the first major economy to commit to net neutral by 2050. And we all know in our industry that means the end of fossil fuels in vehicles by 2035, 2040, that sort of area. However, if we transit from purely fossil fuels and purely physical interactions into the digital and the green, for example, we're forecasting a shortfall of 14 billion in road fuel duty, and that would drive a change towards alternative methods of funding, the use of ANPR, the use of automatic vehicle tracking, the use of road tolls and other road pricing schemes to provide a net neutral cost to the public, but to transform local government income into the 2030s, 2040s. Investment in infrastructure is at a record level, but it will all be focused on achieving that net neutral. Taxation would also have to move away from fixed goods. A £35,000 car being built right now has a percentage taxation. You'll be downloading a digital plan and printing vehicles on a 3D printer. That's the ideal. Global Britain is a force to be reckoned with. We are a very innovative, a very fleet of foot economy. But we also need to be aware that we need to trade locally with our local businesses and our local partners and allow those people to earn their bread and butter and put it on the table for their families. Change is coming to us all, and parking and transport has always been one of the leaders in moving an economy forward. We get people from A to B. We look after the last mile of most transport in parking services. So with that background, I'm delighted to welcome our expert panel. Joining us today, we have Richard Walker, who is the Parking Partnership Group Manager for a hugely successful shared service in North Essex. Following Richard, Rob Shoebridge from Derby City Council, the Civil Enforcement and Parking Manager, will be talking about some of the innovative schemes that he's introduced at Derby, and that's a very fascinating expansion of parking services into other areas. And last but not by no means least, Andrew Dunn, the Team Parking Manager at Bath and North East Somerset Council, will tell you how digital permits have allowed the council to implement some very innovative ways of dealing with their residents. Without further ado then, I'll hand over to the esteemed expert, Richard Walker from the North Essex Parking Partnership. Thanks, Richard.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Richard Walker from the North Essex Parking Partnership, and I'm going to take you through a little bit about paperless permits and cashless car parking and how it's helped us in our journey to date. The next slide, please. So the North Essex Parking Partnership is a partnership of 7 authorities stretching from London up into the start of East Anglia, I suppose. We've 12 districts across Essex, split into 2 parts. The north is my area. Most of the rural part of North Essex includes the London Airport, borders onto London on one side, and also onto the sea out at the coast in the north of our patch. I'm going to talk about 5 tips for a simpler way to work with online parking accounts. So the next slide, please. The first tip really is to put in an online parking account. In our example, we've saved around about £50,000 in stationery alone. Now, that's for everything that we do. Parking account can cover absolutely anything that a parking stay could be. That could be a residence visitor permit, it could be an annual residence permit, it could be a cashless car parking stay, it could be a stay at a leisure centre, it could be a park and ride bus journey, it could be all sorts of things. So whether it's 10 minutes or a stay of 2 years, as long as you can describe it in logical terms, then you can put that into an online parking account. Alongside that, it's really important to consider all media and the promotion and marketing communication of what you're doing, particularly in terms of the smart app, the mobile phone, text service, online service, the phone-based service, and email. It's really important to include everybody for access into services, and you need to be able to talk to customers who are not online. So, for instance, we switched over our residence parking permits to start with, so everybody had a one-off payment every year into an online parking account. And for those people who couldn't do that by the internet, we were able to provide a telephone service so that somebody could speak to a real person at the other end. And it's really important to be all inclusive with the whole system. The next slide, please. I talked a little bit about communication there and marketing. So it's one thing to talk to everybody, but it's the other thing to promote this. Alongside everything that you do, you need a really good set of offers, not just the offers that you can talk about, but the offer of the destination as well, of course, the thing that people are buying. So build it and they will come, but you also have to tell people and market the thing as well. So you need for this to know your market and know your costs. And if you're providing some sort of special offer, you really need to find some sort of niche market and market to people. So ask them what they want and provide that thing to them. And as long as you can provide a niche that won't cost the council, your company, too much money, then all is good all round. So we have a whole series of plan, do and review, but keep it simple, I've said there. So what I mean by that is to have a minimum number of offers, but to use them for different sorts of things. So for instance, we'd had a 4-hour parking stay, and that's just a 4-hour parking stay. There's your tariff for it, and it's valid from 9:30 onwards throughout the rest of the day. But we've marketed that in 3 or 4 different ways. So you could park after the morning peak and go shopping. You could park during the afternoon, and you could come and visit the town and have a meal and maybe stay a little bit longer and stay after the after afternoon peak. So there we are. Keep it simple and recycle as much as you possibly can. But it's really important to tell everybody what you're doing as well in order to gain a bit of leverage with this. So try social media. Can we have our next slide, please? Looking ahead a little bit and talking about the seamless parking, seamless stays and frictionless future. Now, what if people were able to go into a car park and not have to guess how long they wanted to be when they parked, but rather pay after their parking, when they've consumed, when they've used, when they've been into the town centre and done everything. Just at the moment, we are at the point where we can say, right, you know roughly how long you want to be, and if you want a little bit longer with our service, and we happen to use My Permit, you can extend your stay. The extension of the stay will calculate the best value tariff overall for you, and not charge you twice, but charge you the best pattern amongst all of the tariffs and offers we've got. But what if you could pay after midnight tomorrow, let's say, a bit like the toll system on the motorway does? What if you could have a monthly parking account? That's probably the area we need to move into and to be more customer friendly. And that would help us take away that need to rush back to your car. Everybody could stay as long as they needed to be, and a service could be ended, a parking event could be ended just when you left the car park. Can we trust the customer, and can we make it easier? Well, with things like ANPR, yes, we probably could if we had cameras to check the registration mark on the entrance and on the exit. I'm sure that the customer will know that they're there, for one thing, but also, can we make it easier for the customer to just to stay for as long as they need to stay and have their parking on account? We have the next slide, please. So the other side of all of the online parking account is what's in it for the council, I suppose. What's in it for the company? Every time we put in a machine, we have to go and collect the cash from the machine. The machine has moving parts. We have to service a machine. We have other associated costs with stocking it with stationery, and the cash collection has to be done on a fixed rota so that we're clear that we know there's no money left in it and there'll be nothing in there for people to steal. If we move across to an online system, of course, it takes cash completely out of the argument. We don't have to collect on a fixed frequency because the transactions are done electronically. If we can move across to there, of course, we can save on our contracted costs, we can save on the moving parts and machines, and we can move away from having to touch the button on the machine. So in a time of crisis, that might be a useful thing to do to save having to interact with something that a few hundred other people have also touched during that day. It's important as well to incentivize people into a contactless system, an online system. So for when our customers return, as they've started to do in their droves, in fact, now, we've offered different things on the online system to encourage them to use it. So you can get 50% extra time on our My Permit service at the moment over what you'd be able to buy with cash. That encourages people to use that, but also recognises it might take a little bit longer in town of social distancing. So as people return, you can promote the touchless service, and as the table there shows, gradually people have returned, and more to My Permit by a larger extent sooner in the process. So up until sort of the middle end of June, when I took the last set of figures, we're slightly further ahead and in the My Permit. So very useful in a crisis as well. And there in the NHS and key worker permit system, we've been able to implement that virtually overnight. There we've got 2,000 permits that we didn't have and a whole new community of people that we can speak to. So I'd say keep a sense of reality with these things and make the system work for the people, the customers you have, and simplicity and realism of things. So introduce the right offers and make sure you're doing the right thing, but keep a sense of reality as well for the council, and don't just make it 100 different things just because you can. Have the next slide, please. Just a quick look into the future then towards parking as a service, which is where we want to head one day. My diagram on the right there is something that I discussed back in 2007. I think as we started to invent the scheme, we needed this digital permit sort of virtual permit system where we could have electronic stays. What do we do with that? I said to Paul at Chipside, and my permit was the culmination of that. We've got all this data and a load of detail, and how can we use all of this together? So if we're still charging for tarmac, that's a pretty old way of thinking about how we think about parking charges, where really actually we're charging for all sorts of environmental, congestion, air quality measures, and we need to get that in some way into the thinking of whoever's buying the parking and the events. If we look a different way about talking to our customers and about using the parking account, perhaps we can start to bring those environmental charges to the fore. We could also look to extend the logic of parking offers where we can do something different, a different sort of offer to the public in the town centre, where we design the product differently for the customer and communicate it with them. Maybe we have offers where people go into shop and they would validate special offers within the shop, increasing the footfall to a shop, or gaining extra time, earning points, maybe earning a park and ride stay to go and try things differently. So there's just a few things, insight into the future, and can an online parking account therefore help to build parking as a service? Thanks very much for listening.
Thanks, Richard. Excellent presentation. A couple of follow-up questions, if I may. Nobody gets off that easy when we're on webinars. Build. We're seeing around the nation now town centre road closures. And is there any more that digital platforms can do? Is there any change in legislation we need to allow you to be able to react to local conditions far more quickly?
There's quite a lot. It would be nice. We've noticed that the government has made a few changes quite quickly during the emergency and the lockdown. They've enabled us to put our TROs online at long last, and the way we do consultations there has changed, and we've been asking about that for some time. If we could accelerate some of the other things, perhaps in the rest of the Part 6 of the Traffic Management Act, the other things that we can do would help speed up cycles through congested areas. We noticed lately there's been a change during the emergency as well to enable camera use to detect parking contraventions in a cycle lane where you've got loading and waiting restrictions. So I think things are gradually moving to the ANPR route. If we could use that as well in parking, so you could start and stop stays, but also those people who don't pay, we're able to issue a PCN through using ANPR. I think that would be a great way forward, and things have got a lot more reliable with the technology now. But it also means that the council has to move on its part as well to educate before enforcing. And if we can start to look at the way we use that parking account, and the people who are members of the account are our community, and we can talk to them in different ways and communicate with them about what they're doing right and wrong, and reward them for the right things as opposed to just penalising the whole time for the wrong things. I think that's a part of the move alongside another regulatory framework.
Excellent, thanks for that, Richard. One follow-up on that. You mentioned that you're using data as your evidence base. Policies used to be formed by feeling and local pressure. Now it's usually formed by evidence-based thinking. How important is you owning the data at the data layer? How important is that to you to achieve your aims and ambitions?
Data forms a great part of the knowledge about the parking service. We know quite a lot about people's parking habits from machine-based data that we already have. But what if we knew a little bit more about how environmental factors influenced the way people travelled, the days people travelled, the times people travelled, the sorts of journeys they'd make if it was raining, if it wasn't? What about the data that comes out of knowing that a special offer in a certain place has had a particular impact? What if you extend that back to people's origin and maybe their decision point on a journey, where you could influence them to travel in a different way depending on the congestion, the air quality, and if they were the last car in that queue to take the air quality over the limit, is there some way we can change the way the offers or maybe the dynamic pricing works to encourage them to a different car park or a different area of the town before they park. Wouldn't that be a great way of helping to educate people on their journey? And the data in that plays a great part. So yes, you can go and look and see what's going on, but the data would also enable us to communicate better with the customer at an earlier stage and be able to encourage them to travel maybe in a different way sooner in their decision path.
Thank you, Richard. Excellent answer. We'll have more from Richard in the Q&A. We've got about half an hour at the end of this seminar. To show support for our very hard-working local government, I'd be very obliged if you could pick up your phones, start tweeting, and use the hashtag traffic and parking, literally to show your support for these very hard-pressed local government officers that are working in unprecedented times. Part of working in unprecedented times is that you tend to find unscheduled challenges. So it's my delight to ask Rob Shoebridge to tell you how he has used the expertise within parking services and extended it into other local government services. Over to you, Rob.
Morning, Paul, and thanks. Hello, everyone. Yeah, just for the next few minutes, just going to share some of the challenges that we faced through COVID-19 back towards the end of March and April, where colleagues from our waste service got in touch with me. Of course, the refuse sites, the tips as I'll refer to them, were closed, meaning that people got lots and lots of waste at home. And we needed to manage demand in terms of how we could get those sites back open in a structured manner. Some of our neighbouring authorities had reopened their sites and they were operating on a rather crude basis of even numbers, registration plates one day, odd numbers the next. Traffic queues were building, people getting frustrated. And the head of waste contacted me, and he contacted me on the back of some success we had back in March at the British Parking Awards for the school attended camera enforcement, the award that we won in conjunction with SEA. And that kind of demonstrates that we think outside the box in parking services. And I discussed it with the waste manager, Ian, and said, we use my permit for parking. I think we can probably make it work for your service. So we went away, put kind of a schedule of work together, bearing in mind we only had 5 days to get it up and running. I'm just going to touch on what we've done there. So we launched the My Permit for Refuse side of things, and I'm just going to kind of show you a few stats. So 99.8% of people self-served. So before, in order to book a visit to the tip, you either had to go online and go through a really lengthy web form, or you just had to turn up. And the turn up method was the one that was in place in the end. That caused traffic queues on a route which was really traffic sensitive. Some of the businesses in the area complained because they couldn't get deliveries to their premises. Customers were put off coming to those premises. So what we did, we essentially created the app with the help of Simon at My Permit and created some booking slots. And we made sure that it was all publicised. We didn't tell people when it was going to be turned on, because we expected a real deluge of people wanting to experience a day out at the tip. People have been locked away for 5 or 6 weeks, if not longer. All of a sudden, the government were going to relax the restrictions, and a visit to the tip was actually quite attractive for some people. So it was really, really important that we didn't just say, right, it's open on Monday, because what we didn't want is the system to be open and then it get overwhelmed. So the leader of the council went on the local radio on the Thursday morning at 7 o'clock and said, this is what we're doing, this is what we're going to deliver, and this is how you do it. Social media to promote the My Payment app went out at the same time, and in the first hour of bookings it coped with 900 actual individual bookings. And I was monitoring the activity throughout that first hour, and I was really, really nervous it was going to fall over. It's something we've never done before, something completely emerging, fledgling, a bit of a risk. It was really, really high profile in Derby. The leader of the council on the radio is my permit going to be able to withstand this demand from everyone logging onto a new system, wanting to book slots, all competing for the same slots, but there's a finite number of slots, but it coped admirably. And when these slides were put together, nearly 18,000 individual bookings had taken place. When I checked that this morning, we're up to 23,000 bookings in the last 3 months. Fantastic, fantastic outcome. And this from an app which is, you know, on the market for parking. I've got a little video now that I'm just going to play, which we put out on social media to show people what they needed to do to try and promote the self-serve aspect. So we put that video together, circulated it on social media to make sure that people knew exactly what was required of them. And I think that was really key aspect of us delivering that 98% of self-service. And all that has been put together by the parking services team. Nothing to do with parking. We've got a facility, we've got a function that we could use, and we helped our colleague out in the waste team. I'm just going to move on to the next slide, just to show you a bit of feedback that we received. It was really, really important that the tip ran properly on the booking slots and that the security officers on site didn't let people in if they'd not got a booking. So at the gate, you've got an officer who stands there and it's got the manifest of registration numbers for 15-minute slots. If your registration number is down, you can come in. If it's not down, you're turned away. And these are some of the really good points that people have offered feedback for. And it was actually quite ironic reading some of the feedback that we received in the local newspaper. And people couldn't actually believe that the council had delivered this. And this was the front page of the Derby Evening Telegraph, the local newspaper. And it was actually heralded that there were no queues at the waste and recycling centre in Derby today. This was unheard of. The cabinet member was there on opening day, and his words were, we will not be going back. We will not be going back. An absolutely fantastic outcome. And of course, we don't want to leave it there. At the moment, we've got 3 security guards who are checking people in as they come in. I'm in talks at the moment with SEA about delivering a camera solution. So the camera will read the registration number, and if you've got a booking, the barrier will go up and let you in to further enhance the service and also reduce ongoing costs. Just want to talk very briefly about the versatility of my permit and kind of just stimulate some thoughts that it's not just for parking. We're now looking at introducing an app to run concurrently to the refuse app to book bulky waste collection. So people who want items like settees, cookers collecting and booking those in using my permit as well. In Derby, we're going to be launching the new Cycle Secure system at our Bold Lane car park, the safest car park in the world. And membership for that is going to be through My Permit. And we just turned our park and ride facility in Derby into My Permit as well. We're pushing the boundaries of My Permit. No longer does someone have a pay and display ticket to show the bus driver. It's on their mobile device. Helps out with audits, helps out with us being able to reconciliate the number of people visiting and using park and ride. Making the most of our intelligence, and that's not my intelligence, that's our intelligence that we gather. I wanted to make sure there was something in this this refuse app for parking services. So the privacy notice that we put online for when people book states that the data you are giving us to book can also be used to collect outstanding debt. There was some nervousness about that initially, but my point was that people often think the left hand of the council doesn't know what the right hand's doing. You're using a council service. If I ordered something from a company online, if I'd not paid, I wouldn't be allowed to order again. So interestingly, we ran some registration numbers through our Chipside database from the My Permit database, and 82 people who had booked a visit at the tip also had a PCN debt. When they're booking their tip visit, they give us their email address and telephone number. I'll probably let you join the dots up as to what happens then. More data, 140 people who've purchased parking via My Permit since January have an outstanding PCN. So we have people parking across our estate who have also got an outstanding PCN. We allow them to park currently without giving them a nudge to say, you actually owe us some money. We're doing and we're discovering all of that at the moment through cross-matching data using people who are really skilled with Excel. However, the future's got to be to automate that and use the data, as Paul mentioned earlier with Richard, the use of that data and where does that data sit. In Derby, we have revenue protection officers, and moving forwards, we want the revenue protection officers to get those nudges when debtors come to our attention. These are some visuals we've put together. So if I'm on a street in Derby and I'm creating a My Permit stay, my registration number will go through the lookup of Chipside, and if there is an outstanding debt for that particular vehicle, a nudge notice will come up and advise the driver that this vehicle has 3 PCNs. It will give no further details about the driver or anything like that, the dates, and a link, hyperlink to click to make payment. One thing we're discussing is if we can make this happen, maybe if they make the payment there and then, that parking stay becomes free. So it's incentivized to make that payment. This will be the screen that they go to, and we would want it to be intuitive, so the notice number populates straight away at the roadside. And then moving forwards, when a My Permit stay is created by a customer, an SMS is sent to one of our revenue protection officers advising the vehicle registration, the location, the stay duration, the PCN count, and the outstanding balance. In Derby, we have 3 revenue protection officers who actively seek collection of outstanding debts and persistent evaders and people who get multiple PCNs. An excellent tool here where they can get an alert. And that's just the 3 screens. Finally, and excitingly, an email I received from Ian Clark, the parking engineer, yesterday, is a spot and follow procedure and what we've now got in place. Ian and his team have been working tirelessly, again with Chipside, My Permit and SEA over the past few weeks, and spot and follow is now in operation in Derby. Spot and follow is a system where all the permits, residence permits on My Permit are programmed into the camera car's brain, and we've also back record converted the paper permits into the camera car's brain as well. That means the camera car and the camera does all the work. The civil enforcement officer simply issues the PCM. It's got benefits that the coverage of residence areas is increased in frequency. There's many people who get to know the habits of a civil enforcement officer, so if they walk past at 8:10, I know they'll not be back for a couple of hours. This vehicle in one of our areas covered 24 streets in 30 minutes. 10 PCNs have been issued. The vehicle again then goes back to the start. Really good selling point for the spot and follow is it also encourages social distancing. So the civil enforcement officers don't have to patrol the streets and keep getting out of the way of the people. It reduces conflict because they don't see as many drivers. It also eliminates the CEOs being detained with the public, who often detain them with miscellaneous inquiries, not essentially always to do with parking as well. So it makes it more efficient all round. That's all I've got to say this morning. I hope it stimulated a bit of thought. I've made a few notes from Richard's presentation as well about some ideas that have stimulated. And I think the last thing I want to say about my permit is that you know, just think that it's not just for parking. It can be used for many other things. And it's about just thinking laterally about it and thinking, what can I do and get the most out of this? So thanks for listening. I hope it's been useful.
Thanks, Rob. Very interesting presentation. One of the questions I suppose that follows up is you can only do this if you have full control of the data layer. One of the things in our industry is sharing data across departments such as council tax, contact relationship management. Do you see any movement or any need for further legislation to allow us to join the dots?
I think it would help formalise things, Paul, as opposed to having local agreements. And at the moment, you're quite right. We all work for the council, and I have to go and speak with council tax colleagues and ensure that our governance paperwork is all absolutely right, the I's dotted, the T's crossed, so we can share that data. And as I said about the My Permit for Refuse app, that took some real persuading of the director that we're going to do this and gather the data for this purpose and use it for that purpose, because there's always that bit of nervousness. My view is it comes back to debt recovery. It comes back to making sure that people pay for the misdemeanors, they pay for the parking contraventions, because if people don't pay, what's the incentive for people to pay? And that's how I managed to convince the director that this was the right thing to do.
Follow-up question on that then. You mentioned that you're starting to analyse data to more efficiently contact your customers, members of the public, with a PCN. Do you foresee that that might reduce costs to the public, for example, on bailiff fees?
Absolutely. Again, one of the selling points to the director that it's not actually in the council's interest to be tipping people off that they've got a PCN, because if it's at the reduced rate and they've got no intention of paying, it's going to increase, and it's going to increase again. We want to do it for the right reasons, and it's about going back to the actual nub of the issue. Parking enforcement is about compliance. Utopia is about you know, everyone complying. And I think this is just another opportunity for us to say, if a case ends up with Bristow and Souter or Equity, they're the two that we use, the enforcement agents. If a case ends up with them, how many times do we get people saying, I didn't receive any of the council's letters, I'm going to the traffic enforcement centre. We've actually got an SMS now that we've sent to you, and we sent it on this date, and it says it was delivered, and it was read. Some really compelling arguments that we can put forward to the traffic enforcement centre to oppose that late witness statement.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Rob. Great presentation. We'll move on now. Just a reminder, hashtag traffic and parking, hashtag traffic and parking. That's not to promote My Permit, that's to say to engage with these council leaders and some of the innovation that they're doing, and say a hearty thanks for all their efforts during the emergency. We have questions to all of the audience, and they're coming in thick and fast. We will get to them in the question and answer session at the end, so please submit your questions. Some of the themes coming in are about the innovative use of data, GDPR, things like how can we reduce traffic around recycling plants. So please get all those questions in, and we'll handle as many as we can. Next presentation then, and by no means least, I'm delighted to hand over to Andrew Dunn. Bath and North East Somerset Council, as you may know, is host to a World Heritage Site. It is of huge importance to the UK tourism industry and has been particularly hard hit. Andrew, you've got lots of innovative things going on in Bath, and look forward to hearing your presentation.
Hello, everyone, and thanks to Paul for that introduction there. So as Paul has indicated, Bath is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Ordinarily, in a normal year, this might lead to us attracting about 6 million tourists. That's not happening this year, so it's certainly painting a challenging picture under the pressures that we're experiencing. So, being at the forefront of technological developments remains important to me within Bath, as it was for the Romans a millennia ago in Bath. The focus is on driving development and use of digital systems and their integration in Bath and the wider parking agenda to help inform policies that both enable behaviour change through informed choice. And that's the sort of topic where I'm going to focus my presentation now. So in Bath, we launched an integrated system in about 2013, and that immediately realised savings of approximately £90,000 a year in both system and stationary costs. We now have on average of over 8,000 digital permits that are active at any one time across mainly Bath, and these are directly linked to our enforcement system. However, the benefits of digital go beyond just these cost savings. Our applications for permits, they're now auto-validated against council tax records. So sharing data, as both Rob and Richard have indicated there. And that can lead to an instant issue of a permit in the vast majority of cases. We no longer require a V5. Effectively, we're trusting our customers from the beginning, from day one of their relationship with us. However, we do, of course, still retain control of those permits. And that's also another great advantage with digital that you don't have with a paper permit. Our customers have greater flexibility. They now have hourly visitor permits. They're able to receive automatic permit reminders, automatic renewals, and that leads to reduced PCN issue and customer contact. Ultimately, self-serve provides back office savings over the years since 2013 of a reduction in FTEs from 15 down to 11. We have cashless parking. It's available at all of our locations through both the My Permit mobile app, web and text service, or it's also available via telephone. This has allowed us to provide residents with a 10% discount for daily parking when they activate through My Permit, linked to their verified account. Ultimately, digital systems provide scalability, flexibility, and with 2 major national changes to the management of blue badges coming into effect in 2019, we were able to implement these with minimal disruption to staff and customers for a single affordable cost. So a key benefit of digital is the sharing of data, and this makes the system and the information it provides infinitely more powerful. Using APIs, we can link together our ANPR enforcement system with our permit and cashless systems. And this has allowed us to survey permit areas using our mobile enforcement vehicles. This increases the area that our CEOs can cover. It reduces deployment in outer areas, but it still maintains that level of coverage that the public, the elements of the public require. This allows us to focus our teams in priority areas for greater visibility, while still ensuring that we can maintain that revenue stream from those permit purchases. The flexibility of these digital systems allows us to develop more innovative options for parking management. Our trade permit allows authorised users to pay for ad hoc parking in locations which are otherwise restricted by short tariffs or permit restrictions. It's a combination of a pay and stay and a permit. It gives flexibility to the user and revenue to the council. We also manage over 1,000 coaches during the Bath Christmas market through self-serve pre-booked time slots, in effect a ticket master for parking bays. This minimises coach impact on the network at this peak time, whilst also providing passengers of these coaches with a managed location for drop-off and pick-up. It's especially important during those times when the hours of darkness are a lot longer. Cash collection, and I'll include car payments within this as well, more broadly, requires a budget within Bath of about £300,000 to both maintain equipment and ensure the safe collection and banking of income. There are other major hidden costs, such as staff time. They require reconciliation, contract management, and we deal with customer contact and ultimately refunds as well. Physical tickets are open to misuse and fraud. Lost coins, jam machines, and overpayments can all cause reputational damage and lost staff time. Cashless provides the convenience of no queues, with payment being made potentially up to 7 days in advance. And with appropriate data protection policies, we can maintain direct contact with our customers, for example, to advise of road closures where they have to advise of road closures where their vehicle is going to be directly impacted, and we may have no need to take the effect of removing their vehicle, which is a great convenience and benefit to them. With no equipment to maintain, the flexibility is again shown with the effortless adoption of new payment channels, such as Apple Pay. And you can see here that by the end of last financial year, cashless accounted for almost half of all P&D use. And indeed, in the 4 months prior to lockdown, Apple Pay transactions actually now accounted for 12% of all P&D transactions. When putting in place cashless parking, it's also important to consider how any contractual service charges should be covered. Historically, the customer has paid these on top of their tariff. But is it right to continue this approach? Should we link this to a charging review and then absorb those costs? Cashless should be cheaper than cash, as it's less associated costs. The COVID pandemic has placed enormous pressure on local authority budgets, and Bath, with its greater reliance upon tourism, has been particularly affected, with over £7 million worth of pay and display income annually being disrupted. The current circumstances, however, provide an opportunity to address both financial pressures and infection control by reviewing the position on cash and the risks that are associated with both cash handling and social distancing. Following our reintroduction of charges back in May, we've seen that 60% of our transactions are now cashless. And this allows us to accelerate existing programs aimed to encourage channel shift alongside a reduction in machines. And on a location basis, and where practicable, this shift should be to full cashless, supported by the removal of the service charges across all the locations. We currently have 4 cashless-only locations, and this includes a small city centre car park, which is short stay, has about 50 spaces. We transitioned this in about October 2009, and yes, we saw a 10% reduction in income. However, this was offset by improved turnover, increased space availability to support local businesses. And additionally, the controls that digital systems have provided mean that we no longer get any abuse from short stay tariffs because the system won't allow that to happen. Pavement widening to support social distancing displaces residents parking in areas that are already under extreme pressure, particularly in central city centre areas, and where people are increasingly working from home. The flexibility of our digital permits has facilitated immediate temporary changes to help alleviate that pressure and also utilise the spare capacity that we've got in our car parks, effectively allowing us to ensure that effective enforcement can still continue without any further permit issue and no additional costs. Additionally, we were able to take advantage of the digital permits to provide extensions and grace periods to all existing permit holders who were struggling and working at home during the lockdown, or to those who had lost their jobs, allowing them to not have to be concerned about whether their car was parked in compliance or not. Reimagining how we deploy ANPR equipment has allowed us to replace traditional count loops, improving the accuracy and reliability of our occupancy data in our larger car parks. Additionally, this allows the identification of length of stay and visit frequency. By linking this to cashless-only locations, you can monitor how compliant your customers are and how long they've paid for. Do your tariffs meet the local needs? And if necessary, MEVs can then be used more effectively than foot patrols to identify non-compliant vehicles. And where compliance is deemed to be strong from this regular monitoring, actually you can divert those resources elsewhere. With over 2.8 million annual P&D transactions alone, the data we control is key to understanding our customer behaviour and the impacts of policy changes, both evidencing these changes and informing future strategies. I think the biggest challenge, however, is in collating this anonymised data and bringing it all together for analysis in a single system. Rob talked about some of his team using Excel. We've attempted to do some of this analysis ourselves with Excel, and I think Excel isn't up to the job in some cases. 2.8 million individual transactions is a lot. And sometimes you need to look at a very granular level of data when you want to see certain trends, understand what impact some of those changes have had on behaviour. With the continued easing of lockdown measures, as public behaviours are beginning to change back to how they were, the increased vehicle use has resulted in a rise in nitrogen dioxide emissions. And this gives us a stark reminder that the climate emergency still exists and still needs to be addressed. Proposals to reduce emissions in Bath and help encourage modal shift to active travel and sustainable transport have been developed and scrutinised, and they're anticipated to be approved later this year with the introduction of an emissions-based residence permit across all Bath's residence parking zones. Here, prices are proposed so that more polluting vehicles are charged proportionately higher based directly on their emissions, with supplementary diesel charges. Bath is also leading the way in the implementation of a Class C CAS, or Clean Air Zone. This is like to be here in early 2021. It's been delayed. We were expecting to launch in November, but the pandemic has obviously had an impact there. We'll be excluding private cars, and non-compliant vehicles will be required to pay a daily charge to enter this zone or face fines. A digital system here is key to both the enforcement of the Clean Air Zone, but also to enable the operation of some of the mitigation measures that are designed to support the local community, such as time-limited exemptions. Integration with the CAS with our existing enforcement systems continues our approach to systems integration and gives us a better understanding of the impact of our policies on motorist behaviour. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Andrew. Fantastic innovation in very difficult times. You have allowed me, however, to say, the Romans, whatever have they done for us? So thanks for that. That's a personal just picked off. Questions are flowing in. We're going to ask a poll very shortly, just a couple of questions to Andrew, and then we'll move into the panel questions. A poll question will be coming up. Keep your questions flowing. The Clean Air Zone. Yesterday, the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State, Paul Scully, who sits on the Transport Select Committee, explained just in brief that the forthcoming devolution white paper is about making sure that power is closer to the end user. And your Clean Air Zone consultation was a classic example of power closer to the end user. 1.7 million words submitted by 8,400 people. How do you cope with that level of consultation? And is there anything we can do to reduce the timescales, the 21 days and so on, to get some of these schemes moving a bit quicker in real time?
So coping with that, it does require a significant amount of resource when dealing with consultation, and the challenges with consultation are engaging with the community and making sure that you get a representative snapshot. So I think there's certainly some challenges there with the use of digital systems there, because I think depending upon the makeup, to make sure you capture all those thoughts, you have to tread very carefully not to be accused of excluding certain individuals. How do you deal with digital? How do you use digital to deal with that? I don't know, to be honest. I'm not sure I have the answer to that.
It was a fascinating example of local engagement. And in fact, you actually pushed back the Clean Air Zone consultation and proposals as a result. And I think that's what digital platforms, forget My Permit, any digital transformation program should engage the end users to provide truly smart services, the services that they demand. One question on the residence discount. Did you see any really positive engagement? Did you see any real negative comments against it? That was quite a significant loss of income for you.
We were actually surprised by the uptake in that scheme, if I'm honest. So it allowed all residents across the district to benefit from this 10% reduction when parking in Bath. Our all-day charge is about £15 a day. But in the main, most of the users were people living within the Bath, taking relatively short trips, And I think over the course of a financial year, the saving or the cost is about £12,500. So it's by no means a significant portion. But I think what it does show is that some of these schemes can have unintended consequences in actually encouraging those short trips. Over 60% of trips within Bath are actually within the CAS boundary, so they're less than 3 kilometres in length. So you know, it's unintended consequences as well. And I think the data these systems can help us gather and analyse, help us to identify that sooner and put in place mitigations to address it, and ultimately leading to more robust policies and enabling. I think the key is going back to the engagement and the consultation. It's enabling the customer and the motorist to change their behaviour in an informed way rather than making them change.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to welcome all our panelists back now just to join us back online, and we'll take some of the questions from the audience. The audience is made up of people as diverse as data scientists, members of the public, people looking at artificial intelligence, automated vehicles. So we're getting a really good range of questions. And I'll try and get through as many of them as I can. We're about to put a poll on the screen, just one single question. We're not going to inundate you with polls. One single question about your general view on the use of apps. So that poll will be coming on screen now, be available for about 15, 20 seconds or so. Now, if I could just ask you to answer that question. Really what we're interested in your views is whether the public are now, post-COVID, more amenable to digital systems, whether you're seeing an increase or an uptake and a move away from cash. So that poll will be on screen for a few seconds more. We've got about 2 seconds, there we go. That is resounding. The results are in, that's resounding. There's 92% of people are saying yes, and 8% of people are saying the jury's still out, too wide a question. Thanks for that feedback. Not just Chipside, not just My Permit, but the whole supply chain to the parking and transport sector is trying to innovate towards what we call smart city. Massively overused, but that's really good feedback. Thank you. Right, let's go on to some questions. We'll take as many as we can. The panel doesn't mind overrunning slightly, but let's see if we can keep to time. I'll just open up my questions panel now. And the first question I'd like to take is the ever popular GDPR. So let's go with Richard. GDPR is quite restrictive. It imposes lots of onerous responsibilities on data controllers and data processors. Do you believe that as a council, GDPR permits you to use your parking data, your permit data, for other uses? So, for example, trying to renovate town centres, trying to encourage tourists into particular venues, giving discounts at particular events. Do you feel that GDPR facilitates that or restricts that?
And obviously privacy is paramount, isn't it, in everything that we do, and we should only collect the data that we need to collect, and we only need to store the data that we need to store. But the other uses of anonymized data, and I think that's the important part of it, that can show us some trends amongst things, where we can build things, where we can put things, what we can do to influence people's choices, can give us a wealth of opportunity in the way we design things. We talked about earlier on, you know, do you go out and have a look at it? Do you do traffic censuses? Do you use traffic counts and all sorts of things like that, some physical things, or can you use some anonymized data to tell you a little bit more about what the public is doing, how they're traveling? If you can get some anonymized origin and destination data out of things as well, change the way people can react at different times of day or to different circumstances along the journey. So I think as long as you've the caveats that only collect it and retain it for the purposes that they are required, and use anonymized data for us, the things that you can use them for, then yes, there's a lot it can definitely tell us and help us with.
Thanks. Rob, you mentioned the link between a permit, which may be a householder or a vehicle driver, it may be a carer looking after somebody, and matching that with, say, DVLA records for keepers. Do you feel that the GDPR is robust enough for that?
Yeah, and I think this is where you do need that element of the human eye and the human brain. So the data that we're cross-matching from people who have got a parking stay against the people who owe PCN money, it comes on the spreadsheets, but then someone has to go through the two to make sure that it's not that the account on my permit isn't Rob Shoebridge at derby.gov.uk and then someone's challenged it from joeblogs at hotmail.com. There needs to be some tangible link, and I think you've got to have that human eye for that. And it's all very well and good if you collect 2,000 cases, but the first case that goes wrong becomes a headline, and that's really, really kind of important to remember.
And I think, thanks for that. It's important to remember that the government is moving towards mandating open data flowing through any ICT supplier to local government. And the ICO is right behind innovative schemes insofar as they actually encourage you to pass these kind of innovative projects through them first to get their view. But as ever, the World Trade Organization, 18 years discussing the moratorium on digital sales tax, we need to move a little bit faster than that in parking services. Andrew, a question has come in about promoting tourism. So the question is, what thoughts are there on how car parking can promote the business and tourist industries at a local level? Is that something that the local authorities should encourage drivers to return to trade locally, or should we actually in the green economy saying stay away, we don't want to see you ever again?
I suppose it comes down to what the key drivers and your main primary objectives are. Obviously, encouraging people into the city centre is great for convenience. It's great for revenue. But then you've got to consider what impact that has on the wider traffic network, and in particular the green agenda being key around climate change. And actually, do you want to be encouraging those stays into the city centre? Actually, what you want to be doing is you want to be promoting active travel, more sustainable travel. You want to be and in Bath, we want to be keeping those cars out of the city centre. Linking in with low traffic neighbourhoods to help make the journeys in not harder, but actually, if you're going to come in, you might find it takes longer to come in. So actually, there is that conflict between bringing you in, but actually, if you come in sustainably, use the train, use the park and ride. The strategies and options that you've got will facilitate that and mean that you're not subject to those delays because the park and ride bus can go straight into town and drop you where you need to go.
Yes, thanks for that. Richard, an interesting one. You are head of a shared service across many district councils. We know that the forthcoming devolution white paper may devolve even more powers, and we know, for instance, Bath is in the West of England sub-national transport body, and the EH is sort of touching on your borders, is starting to shape its geographic policy. The question is, are you using any of your parking on my permit data to promote driver behaviour change? And linked to that, if you suddenly have a local lockdown, a zone 1 local lockdown, how can you use your digital platforms under the law to get that information to the drivers through the app really quickly?
Yeah, active travel is all to the fore, isn't it? And our politicians have been talking about that since they had to restrict travel on public transport. There's a great number of ways that we can encourage people to travel differently and still take up those other types of active travel that means you don't have to take the car right into the town or city centre. Andrew there mentioned park and ride. There's also an emerging park active where you might reuse some of the long stay car parks that previously commuters would have taken up to park there and walk in. So park and walk is coming to the fore as well, where you don't need to drive right into the town or city centre. How can we communicate with people that these things are coming to the fore? Obviously, having a platform where we can where people have got a digital account already, gives us a community that we can talk to online. We can email, we can talk to people in the app. And if we get good at doing that, we can hope to encourage people to take different travel choices as they're planning their journey. So they're looking for a destination day out. How should I travel today, or what time should I travel today, given the pollution that's in town, given the congestion that's around, or given some other circumstances that we don't know about yet, which might be a local lockdown or something else. We can easily communicate with a lot of people, which we previously just couldn't do if we have everybody has a parking account.
Yeah, very good point. Thanks, Richard. Rob, a question has come in. You're a really important urban centre. Lots of people both live in Derby and travel to Derby to work, and you've also got a good mix of heritage that people want to come and see. Do you have a sense that people are still criticising the move away from cash? They're still insisting on physical pay and display machines, physical paper permits, physical ability to pay at post offices and shops? Or do you see now that there's a distinct move by the service users to move completely digital?
Yeah, good question. I think twofold really from me. We had a couple of locations in Derby, an on-street location and a car park, where the machines were getting vandalised and broken into. And it was costing us money month on month. So I discussed the matter with Ian, and we took the view to remove the machines. A really, really drastic move. So the car park and the street location became my permit only. So overnight, people were turning up at the car park and they were kind of, oh, it's my permit only. We, of course, didn't go straight to a penalty charge notice. We issued some warning notices. But you have that hardcore, you want to push and push and push and get 3 or 4 warning notices. So we then moved to the penalty charge notice after 3 warning notices. However, for those people who appealed the PCN, we actually gave them the chance to create a My Permit app, pay for a parking stay, and we cancelled the PCN. So we incentivised the fact that they would have the PCN cancelled if they moved on to the new method of payment in that car park. For those who were resistant to that, we pointed out that if you pay the £3, we'll accept that and waive the rest for the PCN. Please don't come back to this car park. Here's some alternatives for you. That meant we eliminated break-ins, we eliminated vandalism, we eliminated cash collection costs, and there was a saving at those 2 locations. A real leap of faith. I was expecting a pushback from our equalities officer, but it's really, really important that you engage with the equalities team to make sure you get their advice. Our equalities officer was actually very, very happy, because one issue that she raised and has raised before is the pay and display machines are difficult for wheelchair users to reach the coin slot. Now a wheelchair user can simply use their smartphone. So it was actually a bit of a win. Just then answering the second part about the digital permits. In November of last year, Jill Crosling, our business manager, sent out 4,000 letters to people who had got paper permits, residence permits. And what we said was, if you go onto My Permit and create a My Permit digital permit before the end of the year, the 31st of December, we will add the time from your paper permit onto your digital permit, and we will also give you an extra month on top of that. So we had an aggressive nudge towards converting people onto the digital permit, and to date we've had 2,600 people who've converted from paper to digital, simply because they got something for free. And for us, as Richard said in his presentation, it's a real cost saving on stationery. Visitors to the council house who previously came wanting paper permits has dropped by 72%. 72% less people coming in for a paper permit. Fantastic, just nudging people.
Excellent, thank you for that. A question to Andrew and then Richard, same question, because I know you're working on these schemes. This is coming from the audience. As background, I attended a subnational transport body working group last week. It was in the public domain, and my words, not theirs. There was a point made that we need to reverse the Pickles directive. So I stress my words, not theirs. The question from the audience is, in terms of increasing CEO efficiency, is there scope to use CCTV, your back office enforcement platform and your digital permit platform working together in real time to, for example, stop officers having to walk around in circles and revisit previous places. Andrew first.
I think there's, within the limitations that we're having to work within, there's certainly scope to do that, and it's something that we're currently in the process of developing. The key for me is the data that you can capture from linking. Well, we already have our ANPR system linked to our back office systems, but it's then being able to monitor what we have in the car park. So people using cash and paying through the machines, we're not getting the data there. So moving away, having just cashless only data means we can, you know, a 1,200 space car park can take quite a length of time for a member of staff on foot to go around, and then they can start again. But actually, with a car or an MEV moped, for example, that can survey that location quite quickly, giving us the ability to redeploy our officers to central on-street areas where customers' behaviour is having a greater impact. It's not just denying the council income, but it's having an impact on the movement of the network. It's having the safety of people. It's preventing a blue badge holder from parking and getting to where they need to go. But then the additional data from that is, okay, so we're monitoring in real time our compliance. So we no longer need to send the resources there. Actually, now we're starting to understand that compliance is strong in real time. Therefore, we're starting to link in with, you know, what Richard was talking around seamless, frictionless parking. We're not able to enforce, but we can be more proactive and reactive with our enforcement, and start to have an understanding of how well do we trust our customers. Can we start to move towards the frictionless parking with less risk around the impact that might have on revenue?
Thanks, Andrew. And Richard, same question with a preface. CCTV was frowned upon because it was looked on a fishing exercise. So how do we turn that around? And I know you're working on schemes to try and use that technology for the public good.
Yeah, it can be used for good, can be used for bad, can't it? And I think the onus is on the councils themselves to prove that we're using this to educate the motorist and to use that before the enforcement. So we're reducing enforcement to everything we're doing, but trying to encourage the motorist. And believe it or not, most motorists actually want to abide by the law, and they do want to pay for what they need to pay for. It's just a very small proportion of the public who doesn't. And I think we do live in a little bit of a bubble as parking managers, because that's all we see, isn't it? We see the people who don't, and those are the people that we tend to get. Anyway, beats, we tend to, we live in the past a little bit with the way we do our patrols, don't we? Foot patrol goes out on its beat, randomly in any direction they choose within a particular area, and they might stumble across something that they have to do something with, almost by accident. And I don't know where they've not been, because they've not been there. If you had a vehicle that could scan, or vehicles that could scan, or cameras on other vehicles that can scan the area and pick up details of what should and shouldn't be there, and locations of interest to you, how much better would it make the information coming to you so that you could focus on the areas which you did need to focus on? And that would give you an overall picture, and we could head for more of a compliance figure. That's a bit of a holy grail in the parking sector. We really want to look for compliance rather than the number of PCNs issued. I could tell you that we issued 77,000 PCNs. Is that good or bad? I don't know. It's just a figure, isn't it? Think about permit areas as well, that we could scan the permit areas using a scan car as well. We could tell those vehicles that should and shouldn't be in there, because the ones that are allowed already have an account and it says they're valid. And if I know the amount of space and the number of vehicles, I could also maybe help delivery companies know whether they are going to find a space in there or not. Think about car parks, and we mentioned ANPR and frictionless. I don't really want to have to walk around all 640 spaces in my multi-story if I can avoid it, to find the one or two cars that might not be in compliance today. But if I was to check them in and check them out, I know those people who've come in, and if they have a My Permit account and they say, yes, hello, it's me and I'm there, I've got a positive, and I know that they have, and I know that's the driver and all the data security things are in a row there, then I know those by a process of deduction, the number of cars that shouldn't be in there, and I can go and deal with them. Better still if we could use ANPR just to find those few and deal with them separately. And then around the other bits and pieces, I could possibly fit a camera on something else, couldn't I? A waste vehicle goes to every house in our council area every week, so it can build up a pattern. A bus goes up and down the bus route several times a day, and it meets other buses on the route, and it could scan for things if you fitted something onto it that can go and look. The patrol cars that I've got out and about, and some of the other vehicles and the technology with them is starting to get to a point now where it can feed me data that can lead me to know about the things that I need to know about. Given that restrictions can be online, by process of deduction, we can get to something more like a compliance figure, which is where we really need to be thinking.
Thanks, Richard. Conscious of time, but we did say we were willing to overrun if the questions flood in, and they are. So let me try and link a few of these questions together. Turning to Rob. How important, Richard said build, build, build earlier. Well, you said build and they will come, to be fair, but I'm turning that into build, build, build. Rob, how important is market research in the decision to build, 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 or should we just build, build, build and then hope that the marketing comes forward? And if you build and then market, how do you communicate the benefits within your overall strategy?
Yeah, I think you've got to know the outcome that you want before you can go through the journey. And you've got to have that visualization of what you want it to look like, and then you plot your way to get into that outcome. What we've done across our kind of estate of parking when lockdown was being eased is that we've marketed our surface car parks on the edge of the city at £2.49 all day from my permit only. We've got some banners up at those car parks, and that marketing then complements and nudges driver behaviour. And those car parks, 2 or 3 of them have been full. We've consciously undercut private operators to get people into our car parks. And remarkably, really, I was expecting some pushback from the private operators, but no one has challenged it. They've retained their prices as they were. So people are coming into our car parks. So, and then it kind of leads on to the next thing that Marcus, our business development officer, is working on, is the incentivizing. We know that people will often park, and yes, Utopia is probably getting people to use sustainable transport, but people will use private vehicles from time to time. And if they do come on the network, they've got to park somewhere. And if they're going to park somewhere, we want them to park in our facilities. So one thing we're just starting a piece of work on is an incentive scheme, potentially something like My Points, something like that. So a bit like when you go to Tesco, you get some reward points. This could work the same. If you spend £2 on parking, you get 2 points. And then maybe towards the end of the month, before payday, people might be running short of money. You can spend your points for that parking stay. So it keeps people using your product and your parking facilities. So, you know, the markets, the idea is there, you know, and I've taken so much from what the guys have said this morning about using that real-time data that are coming in from the camera cars. Our camera cars are driving around the permit areas now. They know how many spaces are available in those areas. That can then link in and maybe publicize on our website in real time. This location's got this many spaces now. As that camera car's driving around, it's also spotting debtors. And if it spots a debtor, there's a slide, and I don't know if the guys at Landor can put it on the screen, but there's a slide. So when it spots one of our debtors, it sends a SMS to one of our revenue protection officers, who goes and puts this notice on the vehicle, tell them that they've got a ticket. So the vehicle's driving around, not just doing the spot and follow for, has this vehicle got a permit or a residence permit, but it's also spotting debtors at the same time. And it's making the most of what we've got, all this data, all this intelligence we've got, and joining up those dots.
Thanks, Rob. I'm going to wrap up now with a question to each, and we've got a good dozen questions here. I'll try and bring into one overarching question. How do you fit a parking strategy within wider needs of stakeholders? And I'm thinking here, for instance, your subnational transport bodies may say no traffic into the town centre. You may say 10% off for traffic into the town centre. Your businesses may say we want longer than 1 hour free parking, we like 3 hour free parking. Is there any way that we can improve the engagement of those stakeholders in formulating your plans? And is there any more that we can do to open the data sets to the public. They can see their evidence, they can see the video, they can see the photographs, they can submit the challenges, but is there more we can do to bring the whole experience together on one common platform? Over to Andrew, if I may, closing thoughts.
I think that there's certainly more we can do. I mean, the aggregation of all this data into one large system is certainly a starting point for that, because it allows us to take all this information that we've got and provide it in a concise way that is representative. It allows people to understand the impacts that their behaviour is having, and that's, you know, we have all this data. We're very data rich, but it is very challenging to do something with it, and it's there to help combat and address the perceptions that I know Richard touched on around the negativity. You know, the enforcement. You know, we only see the PCN that the vehicles that get PCNs, when actually with 2.8 million transactions annually, compared to the sort of 40,000 PCNs we issue, that's a drop in the ocean. You know, compliance is by far and above the greatest, and that links into the success of the strategies that we're delivering. Touching on where it sort of fits in with the strategies, I think parking is an endpoint amongst other someone's journey. We want to make that endpoint seamless, but I think it's, you know, we're certainly seeing within our region at the moment that the upcoming focus on climate emergency, on low traffic neighbourhoods, those sorts of policies, they're starting to take the priority. And I think, you know, whilst I've talked around wanting to engage to enable, parking policy is coming perhaps below those elements. That's becoming the priority at the moment, and then what we're doing is what's left, making the changes. You know, there is some enforced action that we need to do, but it's how we use this data to reassure people and engage with people, because, you know, ultimately people are trying to park their private property on the highway, and we want to challenge that behaviour, that mindset, emphasising the benefits to what we're doing.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Richard, same thing, but a supplementary question has just arrived. Are we seeing the end of on-street parking?
To answer the first part first, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Parking's overly complex, isn't it? And wouldn't it be nice if we could make things a little bit simpler by saying either you can park here or you can't park here? We've been experimenting with red lines lately to say you really can't. So if you reduce the hierarchy and the number of different types of things, how much simpler would it be to help the public understand, yes, you can, or no, you can't park? Parking strategies, it's all about a bit of balance, isn't it? I always liken this to carrying a tray of coffee. If you tip too far in any one direction, it all goes a bit wrong. There's a bit of a mess. And if you keep tipping it in that direction, then it just gets worse, doesn't it? Yeah, there's a balance between town centre vitality, the congestion causing air quality, being able to support transport policy and actually getting people through the network, and all the rest that goes around that. There are times and better times and worse times that people can come in, and if we can better inform people through the use of data, and you mentioned open data there and opening things up, if we were to gather some of these things together into one place, into one platform, enable it to better answer people's questions, maybe use a bit of AI in there to promote the times that it's better to go in. You could use different schemes to say it's a green day today, much better travel, and then use that to help amend your tariffs. Maybe there we go. Everything's compromised at the end of it. But yes, I think open data has a place, and sustainability definitely has a place. Yeah, where else can we go from there if it's not sustainable? What was the other point, Paul, just to conclude?
Are we seeing the end of the need for on-street parking? And with here, things like the Law Commission decriminalising,
Yeah.
potentially going out automated vehicles and harps in particular, decriminalising red lights, decriminalising speeding. Is there any need for on-street parking?
Well, travel into towns has obviously changed dramatically, hasn't it, in the last even 3 months or so. It's absolutely vital that town centres are still the heart of our communities and the place that people want to go as a destination, but the reason for going there is going to change, and I think the way people shop and travel will change in future as well. We need to look at what's going on with social distancing, but also improve active travel links through to the places where you can park. And there may be a renaissance in off-street parking. Yeah, we might see a bit more of that, where we need to use the road space differently, either for sustainable travel modes, for cycling, for EV priority, for bus priority, when we can all start to use buses again, and use the highway and carriageway space in different ways in future. That might mean we need to think differently about where we put the cars. Where else would you allow me to park 2 tons of my property, other than on my own property? It's a bit of an odd situation when you think of a car as just a unit of volume, isn't it?
Thanks, Richard. We'll close down at midday, if that's okay. Rob, final thoughts on those overreaching questions. A supplemental has just come in, and the question is, do you see EV being an integrated part of the parking journey? You're going to stay for 2 hours, you want to book your EV charging point as well.
Absolutely, and I think this is where cashless parking, My Permit, will allow people to book. We can manage the demand there so people don't turn up disappointed. When those spaces are booked up, we can maybe put a bit of a lookup on there, like when you go onto a website to search for a hotel, where's the closest one, where's the cheapest one, some intelligent lookups. So I think absolutely EVs, and we need to look at how we can encourage that. In Derby, we've just been awarded through the Emergency Travel Fund the project Moving Derby Forward, so the road layout and some of the roads in Derby city centre are changing. The fact that some of those streets are where My Permit parking takes place allows us to quickly engage with anyone with residence permits there, and also suspend that parking facility. So I'm not going to turn up disappointed because it's no longer available for me when I'm looking to purchase it. But I think the things we do, we need to always think about sometimes some unintended consequences. And I talked earlier on about the 4,000 letters that Jill sent out and the positive outcomes there. That's had a bit of an unintended consequence that we now get calls from members of the public saying there's 10 cars on our street without permits. So do we actually look at starting up a database with My Permit, a bit like the is the car taxed with DVLA, where there's a lookup for somebody to simply put a registration number in it, tell them if they've got a permit to reduce that contact. So for me, it's really exciting, emerging area of work, and it's just simply untapped at the moment.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Rob. But more importantly, thanks to you, the audience. Those were fantastic questions. And if there's one thing that the emergency has shown us, is that we should do more of these kind of things. Part of the good consultation. I have always believed that knowledge is not power, shared knowledge is power. So my thanks to Landor Links and the team at Parking Review for organising this seminar. If you'd like us to do another one, please let us know. #traffic and parking. Until next time then, thanks to everybody. Goodbye from me.